And if the BRICS nations want to do that, that's okay, but we're going to put at least a 100% tariff on the business they do with the United States. You know what the BRICS is, right? Well, sanctions or tariffs. I think the word tariff is much better because it keeps your dollar stronger. Put a universal tariff on anybody doing business in the United States because they're coming in and they're stealing our wealth, they're stealing our jobs, they're stealing our companies, they're hurting our companies. Talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada. Probably February 1st is the date we're looking at. For Mexico and China, we're talking about approximately 25%.
As he returned to the White House, President Donald Trump wasted no time in ramping up his tough trade stance. On his inauguration day, he threatened hefty tariffs up to a 25% on goods from Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariff on imports from China. But why these countries? Trump claims that these tariffs are a leverage tool, pressuring Canada and Mexico to help stop illegalities into the US. For China, tariffs are a part of Trump's long-standing goal to get better trade deals. But what are tariffs and how does it impact our wallets? Tariffs are a tax on imports. Tariffs are charged as a percentage of the price a buyer pays a foreign seller. In US, Custom and Border Protection agents collect tariffs at over 320 entry ports. When a tariff payer increases prices on goods, consumers end up footing the bill. There is a larger question of how exactly is Trump planning on imposing these tariffs. While a broad 10% tariff on everything seems likely, President Trump is using tariffs as a key part of his trade strategy. He's targeting major US trade partners to push for policy changes. For Canada and Mexico, Trump is threatening up to a 25% tariff on their imports unless they take action to curb illegal immigration and the flow of drugs like fentanyl into the US. In the case of China, Trump has previously proposed a 10% tariff on Chinese goods to pressure Beijing into agreeing to better trade terms. He's also used tariffs as a bargaining chip, such as with Colombia, where proposed tariffs were withdrawn after the country agreed to accept deportations of undocumented immigrants. Retaliation from these countries is highly likely, with Canada and Mexico potentially imposing their own tariffs on US exports.
I say we must remain calm and have a cool head, acting step by step. So at this moment, what President Donald Trump signed is that the trade agreement continues, and they open consultations for the review that will be done in 2026. That's what it says. Regarding the Gulf of Mexico, beyond anything else, they establish it for their continental shelf. For us, it remains the Gulf of Mexico, and for the entire world, it remains the Gulf of Mexico.
We will stay steady. We will stay steady on focusing on defending both Canadian interests, but also on defending the economic relationship between Canada and the US itself.
Overall, these tariffs serve both as a tactic to change foreign policy and as a tool to protect US industries, though they come with the risk of economic disruption and inflation. In a recent post on Truth Social, US President Donald Trump has reiterated his threat to impose 100% import tariffs on BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, if they attempt to reduce reliance on the US dollar for global trade. While Trump dismissed the idea that BRICS bloc would ever challenge the dollar's dominance, he emphasized that countries attempting to do so would face massive tariffs. With less than 24 hours before President Donald Trump's deadline to impose sweeping tariffs on the three biggest US trading partners, Canada, Mexico, and China, the global economy is bracing for impact. But the threat comes at a time when BRICS nations, particularly China and India, are exploring ways to decrease their dependence on the US dollar. President Donald Trump's recent tariff threats against BRICS nations, particularly if they continue pushing for de-dollarization, are unlikely to impact India immediately. In recent years, India has taken steps to reduce its dependence on the US dollar and promote the internationalization of the Indian rupee. The Reserve Bank of India allowed trade in Indian rupees for international transactions starting in 2022, a move that came after sanctions were imposed on Russia due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. Hence, if tariffs are imposed, they're more likely to target major de-dollarization proponents, with India facing a lower risk. However, India remains committed to advancing rupee trade, particularly to safeguard its economic interests and reduce its dependence on the US dollar. Now the question is, will these tariffs actually work? Trump's approach has always been to use trade policy as leverage, not just for economics but for immigration and foreign policy too. But the risks here are big. Trump argues that tariffs would make US wealthy, shelter it from competition, and become an anti-immigration tool. While it is still unclear whether he'll push through these tariffs or back off after negotiating with the countries involved, for an average American, the big takeaway is that tariff equals higher prices. A new round of tariffs could be coming, but with a lot of uncertainty about who will be affected and by how much. As the tariff deadline nears and uncertainty floats, the question remains, will Trump go through with his tariff bomb, or is this just another negotiating tactic?